Welcome. My name is Emily Marseille. I'm a PhD student at the University of Exeter in England. On behalf of GWNet, the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, I'm presenting our next portrait of our Energy Transition Role Model series. This initiative is supported by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. I'm here today with Dr. Jemma Green. Hi, Jemma.
Hello.
Dr. Jemma Green is co-founder and executive chairman of PowerLedger, a technology company that uses the blockchain to facilitate energy trading, energy asset financing, and carbon markets. Setting her career trajectory early on, Dr. Green became the voice of sustainability and corporate social responsibility in the business of big money lending while at JP Morgan in London. She then went on to become a research fellow at Curtin University, was Deputy Lord Mayor of Perth, set up the first fossil fuel-free pension fund, and has sat on numerous boards championing sustainable business such as Carbon Tracker and Climate KIC Australia. In 2016, Jemma co-founded PowerLedger, and in 2018, Jemma was named EY Australian FinTech Entrepreneur of the Year. Wow. Welcome, Jenna. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So I thought we'd get started by asking what your journey to sustainable energy entrepreneurship has looked like.
I think I kind of fell into the career that I have. It wasn't through kind of grand design. When I was about 26, I was working in banking, and I knew I didn't want to stay in mainstream finance, but I hadn't yet figured out what else I wanted to do. And I did a leadership training course. And as a part of that, I had to do a project, and I looked around at offices at the bank I was working with and thought, there's no recycling here. I might be able to do something about that, and pitched this idea to the chief operating officer for Europe. And he said, okay, let's do it. So 3 months later, we had recycling bins around the offices, which was 9 buildings, actually 6 buildings rather than 9,000 staff. And I was really happy with this outcome until I saw people throwing their recycling into their rubbish bin at their desk rather than walking to the end of the aisle of desks. And I thought this project needs a part 2, and I'm going to call it Bin the Bin, or in America, Trash the Trash. And I went back to the COO and said, could we go binless and remove all the small bins under people's desks and put at the end of the aisle both a recycling bin and a rubbish bin? And he said yes. And 3 months later, we went binless, and I became the most hated person in the office overnight. And I was blamed for rats in the office. The Facebook page was created called Bring the Bins Back, and bankers were like throwing their toys out of the pram, saying they were so busy making money for the bank that they, didn't have time to go to the bins. So we said we'd put them on the way to the loo. And then they were like, well, we're so busy making money for the bank, we don't have time to even go to the toilet. And I thought, this is so interesting because, how do you make people do things that are good for them, but it requires them doing some kind of behavior change? And I thought, this is more interesting than my day job. I want to work in this field. And I went on and started studying formally sustainable business, and did a postgraduate certificate and a master's in sustainability. And at that time, the bank was setting up an environmental risk unit to look at its lending through a financial and sustainability lens. And I was chosen to help set up that team and worked in it for about 6 years. And then upon completing my master's thesis, I took a sabbatical and went traveling around for about 9 months, did the Camino de Santiago, and got really into hiking, and got this idea that I wanted to build an eco-village. And it was a bit of a crazy idea at the time, but I ended up coming home and being introduced to a professor at Curtin University who thought that was a brilliant idea and that I should do it as my doctoral research and do a PhD on the topic. So I did a PhD in electricity market disruption, looking at what's happening in the building sector, where lots of buildings are now installing rooftop solar. And so I kind of fell into this topic of electricity, but I designed a solar and battery system for an apartment building, which was the first of its kind in Australia. But I had this idea of creating like kind of trading environment within the apartment building where each apartment was allocated units of electricity, but if they weren't home to consume that allocation, they could trade it with their neighbours. And I wasn't able to find any software that could really realise that. And by chance, a former banking colleague of mine emailed me at the start of 2016 and introduced me to these two people that worked in the blockchain. And they came to my house after I'd had my first child, which was about 7 weeks old. And I called up my mum and, said, could you come over and hold the baby so I can get out of my pajamas and have a meeting with these people? And they came and were so excited and like almost irrationally exuberant about this thing called the blockchain. And I didn't really understand what they were talking about, but subsequent to the meeting, looked into it further and saw there were applications in the electricity sector. And I think about 4 months after that, we formed Power Ledger, really with that idea in mind, which was creating a market mechanism to actually encourage the right outcomes in the physical electricity market and engaging citizens as utilities as a part of the market, not just as sort of passive buyers. And so I kind of fell into these different sort of things into my career just through random events, not through really grand design. But I think what makes Power Ledger, the technology and the concept behind it perhaps different to the BIN project, is it's about putting an economic incentive in place to get people to deliver the right outcome that you want them to do. And I think that is going to encourage far more behaviour than kind of compliance, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, amazing. And what is your main motivation in your day-to-day work?
Well, in the case of Power Ledger, it's delivering clean, resilient and low-cost electricity markets for all. That's our vision. And, engaging everyday people to help collectively create an electricity system that's fit for purpose.
Great. And what's been your severest hurdle so far?
Every day. There's so many, there's so many small decisions that you make throughout a day, and sometimes you don't realize whether they're good or not. And if you make a few of them in a row, they can add up to, a bigger strategic problem. But I think that you've got to have an attitude around making mistakes that you get over them fast and learn from them as well. If you kind of get upset by them and you make it mean that you're kind of, that it means something about you as a person, you're not going to want to get back on the horse again. And I think part of being an entrepreneur is you're experimenting constantly and seeing what works, and you don't always get it right, but you've got to get up, move on from that and keep calibrating. So it is you've got to be in the mood for making mistakes and rectifying your course. So I think, and really embrace that as part of the innovation process. And failure is like, you've got to have a failure resume and be willing to talk about it, and use it as an access point for other people to see how they can be more bold and daring. Because if you're not making mistakes, you're playing a too small game.
Great. And what would you say your proudest success has been?
Oh, definitely having my beautiful children. Motherhood wasn't something that I had really wasn't strongly on my radar. I actually, with my first child, thought I should probably have a child because I might regret it when I'm older. And it wasn't that maternal, and I think my family was a bit worried. But as soon as my daughter Emily was born, I just fell in love with her and thought this is the best thing ever. And I'm now 7 months pregnant with my third child. And I think that, raising children that are really, able to comprehend the world that we live in, I think, and trying to educate them in a broader sense of just schooling, I think, and seeing them blossom and flourish, that's my proudest achievement by far.
Amazing. What career paths would you say could lead other young women to entrepreneurial activities like yours?
I think there's so many angles to kind of approach it. I mean, tech is probably the most underdone one for women, but I think women make great systems thinkers and engineers. And if you look at actually the earliest technical specialists, they were women. So women that were managing telephony and some of the technical fields associated with that sector. But I think that in the 70s, there kind of became this persona around tech people being the geeky, nerdy guy. And so there were less sort of role models for women to look to. But I think there's a kind of renaissance going on around that with like coding for girls and lots of workshops for women that are early career women that are working, and then also girls in school, primary school and high school, to engage in sciences and contemplate a career in tech. So I think that's really exciting. And they have a different approach to problem solving and learning that I think is really important for innovation. You need more kind of systems thinkers and more linear thinkers to collectively solve some of the wicked problems. And so that's one angle. The other is through commerce and really understanding markets and marketplaces and how products can help solve problems in markets and deliver more efficiency or value. So I think that is another entry point. So entrepreneurs that want to start up businesses that have a background in commerce and business. And then there's probably the technical data side of things, project management and product development as well. So I think there's quite a few fields or ways that you could kind of approach becoming an entrepreneur, all of which are perfectly valid ways to sort of start a business and succeed.
Following from that, it's quite similar, but are there any specific skills that a woman might need to become successful sustainable energy?
Yeah. The main one, I think, is, there's probably two. You have to be persistent, and you have to have resilience. Resilience is something I think that you build over time through persisting and, failing and getting up and trying again, so that you don't make it mean something about your idea necessarily or yourself. And so in the face of, pushback or failure or things not working how you hoped, you still get up and you continue, and you'll be like kind of water to find another angle or a way to approach that problem in a different way. So I think that being persistent and resilient are two absolutely essential ingredients.
Great. And based on your experience, what are the opportunities and challenges for women wanting to make a difference today as sustainable energy entrepreneurs?
I think there's so many, limitless. I think 1.3 billion people don't have electricity at all. So I think there's huge opportunities to improve standard of living. Those people don't have access to medicines, or without electricity, they can't set up businesses and become economically self-sufficient. The prospects for themselves and their families' lives are severely limited. So I think there's a huge opportunity around like electrification. And with the COVID-19 virus, actually in Australia, there's been a huge increase in demand for solar systems that has occurred since that has become known more generally. And I think that's driven by, my hypothesis around that is it's driven by people wanting to become more self-sufficient and self-reliant, and seeing that isn't a way or an avenue for them to build self-sufficiency as a first port of call. But then I think that looking at how marketplaces can hang off those assets. So yes, it will supply my own electricity needs, but if I've got surplus requirements, I can sell that to my neighbors or trade it in the market in the peak and pay back my investment faster or generate passive income. I think there's enormous opportunities, not just from the physical asset of the energy, but starting to look at the secondary and tertiary things that can be built off the back of the physical system. So that I think there'll be many opportunities that emerge for entrepreneurs in sustainable energy. And it's no longer just the kind of basic idea of swapping, you can't just swap out a coal-fired power station with solar farm, because we know that solar farms only generate electricity when the sun's shining. So we know that we need to find ways to provide the power at other times of the day, and we need a market mechanism to really encourage that. So I think that there'll be plenty of opportunities for technology integration to make all that happen. And there's different market settings and regulatory environments that will present different opportunities. And it's, you know, electricity is almost replacing the petrodollar, which, you know, used to be in reference to barrels of oil, but electricity is really the kind of lifeblood of our economy now, not so much petrol. And I think that's going to become even more prevalent over time. And, you know, if you can transact value that is referenced by use of electricity, then I think there are enormous opportunities to extract value as entrepreneurs.
And are there any challenges that women might face as sustainable energy entrepreneurs?
Well, I think there's just, you know, challenges that entrepreneurs face and women face trying to be entrepreneurs. And in electricity, I mean, it is probably more male dominated. You know, there's more engineers in the physical electricity system than there are women. There's more men working in engineering roles. But in terms of the markets, I think there's a good mix. But I think that it's not something I've really thought about. Oh, you know, women are going to struggle in this sector at all. But I think there's an opportunity, and it probably is less male dominated, so it's probably less scary to go into it because there are other women around, and you're not going to be the lone ranger. But yeah, I think that electricity has many problems caused by renewables that are going to need really smart thinking people, both men and women, to solve those problems and deliver, you know, resilient, low cost and clean electricity.
And do you have a recipe for combining your career with your children?
A recipe. I think that's a conversation lots of people are dealing with right now, having to work from home. It's something that I've been, you know, doing a lot of since I set up my company. And my children are not at school at the moment, you know, they're preschool age. So I haven't had, like, you know, a school cancel its activities and had to deal with that. But I think you need a support base around you, your family, childcare to make that work. And I think that the situation now with more people working from home, and I've been on several conference calls this week where people have got their kids in the background and they're kind of apologetic. But I mean, that's happened to me so many times. Like sometimes I'll have conference calls at 5 or 6 in the morning and a child, one of my kids gets up and you can't like kind of pretend they don't exist. And so I think there's a reality to and an appreciation to understanding that is part of our lives and we don't have to pretend so much that they don't exist. So they can be incorporated in a way that's far more accepting and natural. And I think that's actually good because people don't want to feel like their work life is completely divorced from the rest of their life, that there is some acceptance of an integration of those two. Although we obviously do want it to be able to delineate. But I don't have a recipe. I think it's very personal what each person, what works for them. But hopefully one of the byproducts of the situations that we find ourselves in right now is that there'll be new ways of working and new ways of engaging with people that don't necessitate us getting on a plane, that there is a great levelizing in acceptance of working remotely and catching up with people via video conference as just as valid as having gotten on a plane and coming and seen someone. In fact, that it's far more efficient to do that, and why don't we prioritize that instead?
Yeah. If you look back on your professional career, is there anything that you would do differently?
Not in the sense, I mean, I feel enormously grateful for the opportunity that I have right now, like a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I hope to make the best of it, really, both to justify, the time that I am away from my kids and also for really to maximize the opportunity that I have right now. So I think I've definitely made lots of mistakes along the way, but overall, like I've made enough good decisions that I'm still here and the business is growing and thriving. And so I think on balance, no, there's nothing I would want to change. It would be, I think, like any entrepreneur, you would like to have less bumps in the road, but they're the things that, again, I think, on reflection, that build resilience, that help you tackle the big problem that you need to, when you get to it, to really drive the innovation and the outcome that you that you want. So I just try and be grateful for the challenges, although sometimes my initial reaction doesn't look like that.
Could you share your most important do's and don'ts that you've encountered during your professional journey as an entrepreneur?
I think you do have to carve out, even if you love what you're doing, you do have to carve out a little bit of space for yourself to do some things that are not work related that are important to you. And it doesn't have to be a huge amount of hours every week, but, you know, like to go for a walk, or, you know, catch up with a friend, or, you know, or cook a meal for somebody special in your life. I think that whatever those things are, I think you want to keep touch with the other aspects of yourself. And don'ts, I think, don't neglect your health and well-being. You know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And if you don't take care of those things, you won't accomplish the bigger goal. And I think that, you know, don't take yourself too seriously. You got to believe in yourself, and you do have to have a strong determination. But I think you got to kind of see the kind of irony and ridiculousness of certain situations, rather than, you know, let them get you upset. If you get to the extent that you can, or at least evolve your initial reaction to that over time. And what else? And do, yeah, and I think even though you've got this big goal that you want to accomplish, I think you have to acknowledge the progress that you take, and acknowledge the progress that you've made along the way, as a way of really encouraging yourself and those around you. Even though we want to be here, we have to find a way of really acknowledging where we are and the accomplishments of where you're at any given point in time.
And do you think there are any governmental framework conditions that could help or support women as entrepreneurs?
Well, childcare is going to be a big one. You know, I think, yeah, there will be lots of 20-year-old female entrepreneurs, but there's also lots of women in their 30s that are wanting to start up businesses, and the ability for them to do that is a function of affordable childcare. And so I think that is a very important thing for governments to consider, and I think that is getting a lot more attention right now in the world.
Yeah. Great. Well, last message, if you could give a message to the next generation of women aspiring to become entrepreneurs in sustainable energy, what would that message be?
I think if you've got an idea, don't wait to set up a business. Explore it further. It might be that you don't end up pursuing that idea, but take that idea to a logical conclusion, whether you either go, no, that doesn't work, or not. And that's by socializing the idea, perhaps speaking to other people in that field, speaking to people that are lawyers and accountants to kind of get a sense of what would be involved to set up a company. So at least flesh it out enough so that you can make a call on it. Don't just let it be the idea, like give it some sunlight. And then I think just through going through that process, you'll create an entrepreneurial mindset to explore ideas. And when the right one comes along, you'll be more ready for it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all of your advice and insights today. It was really interesting talking to you, and it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thanks for the opportunity to chat.
Great.